Hey, everybody. We're going to wait a couple more minutes and allow people to join the call. So make yourself at home, go grab a drink, grab a little lunch snack, and come back and join us at 12 on the dot. And we're going to get started then. If you don't mind, if you're comfortable, we'd love for you to tell us your name and where you're coming from, where you're joining us from in the chat. And we will be using the chat hopefully fairly regularly throughout the call. So make yourself comfortable there as well.
It's fun to see where everyone is from.
I know, I love it. Erica, I lived in Norfolk, Virginia for about 6 months early in my marriage, and it happened to be right in the middle of summer. And I'm an Oklahoma girl, so it's not like I don't understand hot, but Virginia hot, I thought I was gonna die. So kudos to you for surviving Virginia summers. They are something. Excellent. I love seeing all of these people join the call from so many places. This is great.
And speaking of hot, I'm probably the only person that uses a space heater in the middle of the summer. So
Right. Michael's got a space heater under his desk and I've got a fan under mine. So there you go. Julie, yes, Julie Hickson Wallace definitely is also of that mind. Welcome everyone. As you're coming in, please go ahead and put your name in the chat and where you're joining us from, and we are going to get started in just a moment. Okay, I will continue to admit people, so if I look like I'm distracted, that's what I'm doing. But I want to go ahead and get started, and I want to introduce you to the amazing Michael Crouch, who will be leading us today. So come on in, get settled, welcome. We're excited that you joined us today, and we hope that you walk away with a little bit more information in your toolkit that helps you be a better leader and helps you feel more prepared. I am Dr. Andrea Bishop, and I'm the director for the Center for Organizational Leadership at Harding. I get to oversee our Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership program. We also have several graduate certificate offerings in HR, learning and development, and executive and workplace coaching. And we also have an undergraduate option as well. So in addition to all of that, I get to build curriculum, train and work with incredible faculty, and Michael Crouch is one of those people. So I would like to share with you the amazing human that is on the screen with you today, Michael Crouch. He is seriously one of my favorite people. We had a conversation yesterday, and when we got off the call, I talked my husband's ear off about how much I liked Michael Crouch. So the first time we met, I thought, yes, this guy, he is the real deal. He is bright, he's inquisitive, he's thoughtful, And more than anything, he's very kind. And I am so grateful that he's joining us today. So in addition to teaching for us, he's the senior program officer for a family office. And in both his current and former roles, he has worked to assist hundreds of nonprofits and grant recipients in their strategic planning. And so he is very well equipped to help us today. He is a graduate of Harding University, yay, as well as his wife. And they have 3 adorable children. They're just the cutest things in the world. We're so grateful that they are part of the Harding community. So, Michael, I'm going to send it to you and let you take over.
Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate it, and certainly appreciate your leadership, not only with the program, but specifically today with this series. And I'm happy to be a part of it. As I'm starting to share my screen here, I will say that let you in on a secret of my marriage. My wife tells me that the way that she knows that I love her is that I listen and I sit attentively. When she's done, I pause for a little bit, think about what she said, and then respond, ask questions. The way I know that she loves me is that she interrupts me and that she asks questions immediately. So I will offer that up to, I know everyone, at least in the chat, can ask questions. So if you want to flag any of them with an immediate need, maybe some clarification that's appropriate, I think it's best to clarify early rather than to try to go back and try to re-understand everything given a clarification that comes at the end. So if you want to flag those for Andrea, if there's any emergency questions, please interrupt me. We will be completely fine there. So I'll go ahead and get started. As Andrea said, part of the work that I have done over the years is working with mainly nonprofit organizations to think through strategic plans and specifically on the goals that they set. I call them metrics often. And so that's the way I think about metrics, and specifically SMART goals is one framework for that. In teaching in the MAOL program, I've also been able to work with for-profit institutions. And so certainly pushing into that space, also in other work with public settings, government work there. So happy to talk through any of the different ways that we think about our organizations. So today we're talking about creating SMART goals and effective strategic plans. In order to have an effective strategic plan, I would argue that part of that is creating SMART goals. So our agenda for today, thinking through our roadmap, we're going to start off by asking the question, what are SMART goals? Make sure that we're all on the same page there. And then if you have encountered SMART goals in the past or encountered writing down your goals, it's appropriate to motivate ourselves. What can that do for me? What can it do for my organization, the people that I work with? And then I want us to dive more deeply into framing it in terms of outputs and outcomes as part of a strategic plan. So I'll say more about that then, go into some specific examples that I made up, some based off of the many metrics that I've seen over the years, some examples of what I would consider a starting place, and then how to improve on that. And then I'll end off with some additional questions that I often get asked about strategic planning, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. Would hope that we have a good conversation at the end. So please share your questions frequently, and we will do our best to get to as many of them as we can. So with that, if you are new to this space, if you haven't heard the term before, we'll go all the way back to the beginning. Peter Drucker is often credited with bringing up the concept of metric-based management in 1954. And then George Doran in his 1981 article specifically coined the term SMART goals, right? So what are SMART goals? SMART goals are a framework for helping organizations and their leaders articulate their strategic plan in an actionable way. Now, I've put up the original Doran acronym for SMART, that your goals are specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time related. Now, you might have heard a different framing there. You might have heard different words used. Most of them get to the same idea, right? They get to the same idea that we are trying to have something that we can measure against. And this was Drucker's idea from the very beginning. that if we want to be held accountable for what we're doing, then we have to have some level of specificity. And I'll say this early and often, this is part of the scientific method, right? This is something that we learned back in elementary school, that you want to state a hypothesis. Why do we state the hypothesis? It's so that we have something to test against. We have something that we are responding to. And if we have that line in the sand that we draw, at least we have something that we can reflect on, good or bad or indifferent, as we move forward. So what is it that these SMART goals can do for us? What are we expecting to happen because we use SMART goals? Now, I'll go to one of my favorite quotations here. This is from Richard Feynman. In fact, you've probably heard this in other contexts. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Oh, man, that is too true, and it's close to home. That I am self-delusional often, right? I want to convince myself that when I'm driving down the highway, I'm driving the perfect speed. Everyone else, anyone who passes me is driving too fast. Anyone who I pass is driving too slow, right? That my way of doing things, my level of feeling passion about some issue, that's the right amount, right? So it is easy to tell ourselves a story. Stories are important. We are a narrative driven people, but sometimes we have to test those narratives. We have to make sure that we are not fooling ourselves into believing something that just frankly isn't true. It's not just true at a personal level, it's also true at an organizational level. So I'll go over to this graph that Lippitt put together back in 1991 about how organizations fool themselves. Organizations have grand visions for what they're going to do. They think that they've lined up everything, but often if we forget one piece of the pie, one piece of the puzzle, we will see that we come to ruin, right? If you forget the vision, then you will lead your organization to confusion because they don't know what is the North Star that they're going after. If you don't have incentives for your organization, you might have all of the different skills and resources that are necessary, but your people will resist you because you haven't properly aligned what you're trying to do with what is important to them. So as an organization, if we don't want to fool ourselves, if we want to make sure that we're being clear about what our plans are, what it is that we want to accomplish, then I would argue we need to have a strategic plan, and embedded within that strategic plan, we need to have SMART goals. So let me transition over to the idea of a strategic plan, make sure that we're all on the same page there for what it is that would be included in a strategic plan. All right, so our strategic plan would have a mission at the very beginning, goals underneath that, within the goals, strategies, and for each strategy, we need to have some level of outputs and outcomes. Let me go ahead and state up front that in terms of a strategic plan, strategic plans are often thought about in terms of plans that last from 3 to 10 years. The modal response here would be a 5-year strategic plan. Most places try to think in a 5-year strategic plan, especially in the nonprofit world. If you're in the for-profit world and you do a lot of research and development, you might have a longer term strategic plan. Anything less than 3 years, we usually think about that as a work plan. Work plans can last anywhere from 3 months to typically 2 years at the highest, maybe 3 years. Most work plans will last for about a year. A work plan is something that has a much more immediate nature, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end. Okay, so diving into the specific pieces of the strategic plan. First, you have your mission, right? What is your vision? What is the North Star for the organization? I'm saying it here. How would you succinctly talk about your organization? 2 to 3 sentences that would very clearly communicate what you are trying to do, your purpose in what you're doing. All right, so once you have your mission, then you have goals. How do you define success, right? You can have one mission, but then have very different ideas about what success is for that organization or for that unit within your organization. So you have to ask yourself, what truly matters? What does it look like when we as a team operate at a high level of performance? And I'll say here, because Harding is a Christian institution, I think it's appropriate to ask questions of faith here. This is Michael's thought here. You don't have to share this idea with me. I think of people as having their own goals, right? Our own mission, our own goals, and people can be Christians, and people can say that what truly matters for them is their faith. For institutions, we might have institutions like Harding University that are parachurch organizations that align in that way, but most institutions are not affiliated with faith anyway. We operate in a secular world. And so what truly matters for them might have an ethical standard to it, but at the same time has some real, some profit-driven motives or social good motives that are driving the work that they do, right? Institutions of all types, organizations of all types have the ability to define their goals for themselves, and that will set them on the path that they're going to go. All right, so for each institution, each organization, you have your mission, you have your underlying goals, and then within the strategic plan, I think this is where the strategic plan really finds its strength, is then diving into strategies, right? So the strategy is your plan for how you intend to achieve those goals. And I like to refer to this as planned innovation, right? Most organizations are not satisfied with where they are. They might like where they are, but they might not like where they are. But no matter whether or not you like it or not, you want to be at a better place. You want to reach a higher plane. And so planned innovation tries to intelligently guess, but guess at the future. What is it that we can do in the future that will allow us to achieve a better research design, or more efficiency, or more scale in what we're doing to reach more people? Whatever it is for you, for your organization, we know that we can't get there if we continue to do what we're currently doing, even though what we've done in the past is good. We're not dishonoring that. But to innovate for the future requires new thinking constantly. And as I say at the end, it's a calculated risk, right? We're intelligent people. We know our organization's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? We've done that SWOT analysis. So now we make a calculated risk about what strategies will pay off for us in the future. Okay, so those first three are what you are often going to see as part of a strategic plan. In fact, if you see a high-level document, it might just contain those three levels of thinking: mission, goals, and strategy. The next steps is where someone who has my background thinks like, okay, this is very important. Previously, I worked on what we called a SLED team. It was a strategy, learning, and evaluation. And every day we were trying to think about how can we connect everyday actions to the higher level strategy, the mission, goals, and strategies that we're putting in place. And then how can we create a structure that allows us to learn from those things? And the only way to learn is to evaluate how we've worked in the past. In the class that I teach, I won't go into it here, we talk a lot about knowledge management. How do we make sure that we are using the knowledge that's available within our organization to improve the culture and to get to a better place? So I'll talk about outputs and outcomes specifically. An output is what you do, what your team does. It is a measurement of something specific that you say that you're going to do. It serves the strategy that it's embedded with under which, and it supports the overall mission as well. So the output is something that only you can do. We're not interested in what other people do. We're not interested in what the competition does. We're not even interested in what we could dream of doing. This is a place to write down on paper what it is that we are planning on doing. How can we make our words into reality? All right, so that's what we say that we're going to do. Now, the outcome is what happens because of what we said. The outcome asks the question, what will it look like if our outputs succeed? If my team performs the actions that are a part of our strategy, if we do those things, what will it look like if we succeed? If I host a seminar and I invite a lot of people, I can do that, right? That's my output. But my outcome is dependent on someone else doing something in reaction to what I did. Now, it's very important that we have a causal relationship. So a causal relationship is when X happens, Y happens necessarily because of it. So setting up that causal relationship is important. Now, not all of us can spend years doing some randomized drug test where we establish scientifically with metaphysical certitude that that is what caused it. It needs to be plausible though, right? Can we convince our managers? Can we convince someone on our board that it was because of the actions that we took that these outcomes occurred? Now, oftentimes, groups don't want to write down their outputs and outcomes because it puts them in a box. It requires them to get real about what they're saying they want to do. So I want to transition to these outputs and outcome ideas and to talk through why that's so important. There's often resistance to writing down outputs and outcomes because people are uncertain about the future. We're uneasy about that, and that is understandable, right? It is a reasonable fear to be concerned about me saying that my organization is going to do something and then what actually happens because of it. Because at that point, I'm on the line. My leadership team is on the line for what needs to happen. Outputs and outcomes are a way of collecting knowledge, of being real with ourselves. Not too long ago, I was talking about talking with an organization about an idea for a project, and we started talking about the specifics and realized that we were talking about two separate things. We started talking about dollars, and we realized that our idea for the amount of dollars that would be put in were very different from the amount of dollars that they were willing to put in, right? So our ideas about what would be done and how resources would be used was very different. And talking through those things helped our conversation at least find some common ground. So what I would argue is that our outputs and outcomes need to be written down. You need to commit them, get them out of your mind so that you can't come back 6 months later and say, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking, right? I meant it to be that way. No, we want to be specific so we'll know whether or not we actually accomplished what we were going to do. So a specific metric that shows that we're serious about the endeavor that we're about to undertake. Not only is it important for you to know from writing it down that you're serious about what's going to happen, I would also argue from a for-profit perspective, nonprofit, the public sphere, it is important from your stakeholders, from the perspective of your stakeholders, whether that's a board of directors, an advisory council, whatever, it's important that they know that you're serious. And the best way for them to know that you are serious about your work is to see it written down and to see the specific outputs and outcomes written. So let me offer up a few examples. These are completely made up, but they're related to the work that I do. And so I will go through each of these. And what I've done here is I've created what not to do, or an example of a goal that I've seen in the past, and then trying to put a little better spin on the exact same goal, probably trying to accomplish the same thing that they had set out to do earlier. And then what are some better ways, even from what I've put down, to better the goals that we're thinking about. All right, so the first one I've put down is one about core performance. And I'm thinking in the educational context, what if I had an organization that was trying to help people better the lives of students? All right, so one thing that I see groups often say is our organization will make sure that students will better understand the fundamentals of reading, right? Who doesn't want that? It's not a bad thing that they've said, but it's not specific, right? It's not a SMART goal. It's not measurable in any way. What does it mean to be good at reading? Does it mean that they can read at the appropriate grade level, one grade level below, a grade level above? Are there standards to which we're reaching to? So from there, here's how I would rewrite the goal. Rewrite the output. By the end of fall 2023, at least 75% first grade students demonstrate proficiency to standards on phonemic awareness as measured by MAP testing. Okay. So once again, I've made this up completely, and I apologize. This is an outcome, not an output. This is something the students are responsible for. But let's go through here. By the end of fall 2023 semester, so we have put a very specific time frame. We are not going to be responsible for this beforehand. In fact, we probably couldn't do it if we tried to set up a goal that was earlier. But also, we're not going to wait for the end of the academic year, right? So this is by the end of fall 2023. There's a time at which everyone has agreed upon. We will measure ourselves at that point. Then we're saying, well, how many of the people that we're working with? Which group are we working with? We're not just working with students, we're working with first graders. Oh, excuse me. We're working with first graders, but then asking, well, how many? Is 70% enough, right? Would 70% be meeting our goal? It would be meeting a certain portion of our goal. 70% is obviously better than 50%, but it's not meeting the goal. It's not meeting the highest standard that we've set for ourselves. And I'll also say that I'll often put in there at least, right? We want anyone that we're managing, anyone that we're helping write their goals, we want them to know it's okay to go higher. Now, this one is a more obvious example. Yes, it's okay to go above that. But if we ask someone that we want you to hold at least 3 meetings on a particular subject to educate a certain population about something, what if they want to do 5? Well, what we want them to know is that they need to do at least 3, and maybe the difference between 3 and 5 is the level of quality that they put in or the level of attendance that they have. So there might be some sub goals that are written within. I keep clicking. So we also have the idea that we know exactly what it is that we're asking them to be trained on. The fundamentals of reading is a good idea, but we can be more specific than that. Here I've identified phonemic awareness, right? That phonemic awareness is just one small portion of reading. And so if we believe that there's something specific that they need to be advancing on, then we can name that. So whether you're in the education world or somewhere completely different, what is the specific thing that we're thinking about? And then finally, we have this idea of who gets to decide, right? What is the standard of knowledge for who will say whether or not they reached it? Because often, if you write your goals in such a way to where anyone can say that you accomplished it, people will have what's called a social desirability bias, right? They want to say what you want to hear. And so they'll say, oh, yeah, students did a great job. Or we put on a seminar and everyone enjoyed it. Everyone thought it was great. But if you measure it, you then have to be accountable for that. And then I'll offer up, I would say that there's even some better ways to think about it. We might even give baseline information. I would feel differently about this goal if I knew that the school previously had 20% of first graders that were proficient on phonemic awareness in the previous year. I would also feel very different if I learned that last year, 85% of the students were proficient, right? So having baseline information tells me, is this an ambitious goal? Is this a small increase? Or even is this a decrease? Or are we staying the same from where we were in the past? We might even care about the growth trajectory, both the growth trajectory in the past, how has our organization performed over time leading up to now? And are there some intermediate goals? Is there something that I could learn halfway through my timeline that would tell me whether or not we are on track to meet that? That could be a sub goal, a sub outcome that we want to measure along the way. Another one here that I'll put out here. What if I wanted to lead professional development for some people that are on my team? So I could write a goal, an outcome that looks like this. All employees will attend training seminar and report a high level of satisfaction. Okay. I have to admit, this is Michael's pet peeve, Michael's soapbox that he likes to stand on. Whenever I can, I try my best to remove surveys from any of the goals that I write down, any of the outputs, any of the outcomes, especially. If I want to know how people feel about something, don't give them a chance to, once again, to practice social desirability bias. Don't let them fill out a survey for a gift card where they say, yeah, everything is fine. Great, 5, 5, 5, right? People will, like water, will flow to the place of least resistance. And if you give them an opportunity to tell you that things were fine or that they're very satisfied, they will give you what you want to hear. A survey writer worth their salt can write you a survey that gets you the results that you want. That's not honest, it's not fair, it's not ethical, right? We don't want to encourage ourselves to fool ourselves, right? It's easy to fool ourselves, and we'll be proud of the work that we did, even though there's not really quality represented there. I will say that surveys are appropriate when we are thinking about qualitative measures, right? So if I know that a program is going well or not going well, I don't have the numbers that I had in the past, I might put out a survey that ask people specific questions about an action that they took, right? Have them reflect on specific actions. And if they're able to reflect on a specific action, then I can gather qualitative information that can help me better understand what it is that my team needs to improve moving forward. Okay, so big soapbox there. Let's move into what I would try as a written outcome for professional development. All right, so try this one. By March 1st, 2024, at least 90% of employees will complete the ALA training, and their direct superior will document evidence based on the ALA rubric that shows improved practice. Okay, so let's dissect this one really quickly. We have a time frame, right? We know the date by which we are responsible for doing this. If 100% of people complete it, but they complete it in 2026, it doesn't accomplish the goal that I have here. Okay, so at least 90%. So I know the number. 85%, not acceptable. It's good, but it's not acceptable. Will complete the training, a specific training that's mentioned here. And then most of the outcome is written about how do I know if it succeeded. I want their direct superior, the person who is responsible for reporting on them, to engage with them in the process, right? Mere attendance of something does not, by osmosis, transfer knowledge or transfer the right way to act, the right way to prepare themselves. So we want to know that their superior or someone who has a stake in the game is seeing a change based off of the standards that were set forward and improved practice. All right. So what I would say is a better way to think about this is to consider how the supervisor is engaged. What does the supervisor have invested in this? If the supervisor has something that they directly care about, maybe a sales figure, maybe a number of people that they're trying to bring in, try to appeal to their interest. Try to find a way to where they will be better off if this person has changed behaviors. And if you can align your goals, your strategies, your outputs, your outcomes to take advantage of something that is of interest to them, everyone will have the right incentives and will be able to act accordingly. All right, one last one. I know we're getting a bit tedious here, but really the importance is in the details of how we think about these. What about relationship growth? I'll say as before I go into this, in the class that I've taught, I've had several ministers come through the course, and they always come out to a great place on the back end, but on the front end, they will usually say something like, Professor Crouch, I really appreciate this, but I'm dealing with relationships. I'm dealing with people in a particular context, and you just can't measure the spiritual growth, or you can't measure building relationships. You can't measure ... right? Now, I'm the first one to agree with them, right? I don't want to try to quantify spiritual growth. No, I think that is inappropriate. But then I'll tell them a story about what I'll say to my students in other classes. I've taught a microeconomics class before, and I will say to the students in there, don't be fooled by the graphs in your textbook. That is not the way that the world works. It is a simplified version of the world. In the same way that someone shouldn't look at a globe and say, that's not what the world looks like. You know, there's this river isn't exactly the way that it is. Well, the person who made the globe isn't trying to be exactly 100% accurate with the way that the world looks. It's not a photo of the earth. It's a model, right? Our strategic plans are not meant to provide every single detail. They're not meant to be the sludge that hold us down to one way that we're viewing the world. They're meant to be dynamic documents that create a model of what we're trying to do and to give us better insight into what we're trying to do. All right, so looking at relationship growth, here's what I would say not to do. Shouldn't say, partner organizations will report satisfaction with our product. Okay, you're already ahead of the game here. You probably already noticed that there's some social desirability bias, confirmation bias, that we're asking people to report satisfaction, tell us that they're happy. Okay, why don't we try this? By the end of Q2 each year, at least 90% of partner organizations will extend their current relationship or expand their purchase agreement as measured by signed sales records. Okay, so once again, we have our time basis. We have our measurables for success, at least 90%. But what's important here is that we've put a marker for what is meaningful in the relationship. whether you're a church minister or you work with an organization that recruits people, or you are having to deal with any sort of relationship, there's always a marker for the actions, the fruit of someone's life, and the way that they are able to show you that they care about the relationship, that they care about your product, that it is valuable to them. And frankly, often that materializes when they are willing to put their money where their mouth is. They're willing to show through their hard-earned money, and that money represents their time, that they're willing to show you that it was worth it to them. A way to do this better is to subdivide it with regional emphasis, right? So you might be in charge of a team that thinks about maybe different sorts of companies that you consult with, or you're thinking about regional sales or regional recruiting or something like that. You don't necessarily have to have an overarching goal that touches on everybody. Maybe you do have a team goal, but you might also have individual level goals that get at what that person needs to work on for that specific relationship, and in that specific region or context or industry. So those are some examples there of different ways that we can think about the outputs and the outcomes. Hopefully I've convinced you that just having a mission, goal, and strategy only gets us so far. It doesn't give us the measurables by which we can react to something. I've worked for an organization that employs whole teams of people to do this. And I'm not suggesting that everyone has the capability to do that. So if you don't have the capability to assign an entire team to that, how can we do this in our small to medium-sized organizations to help us think about being a learning organization? So I'll pass this on to this idea of a timeline. Right? How can we be serious about being a learning organization? I would suggest that you have to give yourself deadlines. You have to set yourself up for success at least a year in advance, if not thinking out multiple years. So this is an example timeline of an organization that I've done some work with. And what they're trying to do here is give themselves a time frame for when there will be certain due dates for their strategic plan, for their work plans, and how will they keep the excitement going? How do they make sure that they're constantly revisiting this rather than assigning themselves goals in January and then coming back in December and realizing that nobody thought about it all year? We never consulted the strategic plan. So this specific team runs it on a calendar year. You can do it on an academic year. You can do it based off of your quarterly reporting, whatever it is for you. Make sure that it fits with your organization. Your work plans should be derived from your strategic plan. So if you have a 5-year plan, it's often appropriate to do 1-year work plans that lead up to that, dividing the larger strategic plan that might be intimidating down into digestible chunks. So that there's small goals that you meet along the way. The planning cycle includes the gathering of information, planning sessions several months in advance of the end of the year. And that's specifically this idea of the first year review, so that you're thinking in July about reporting in December, right? So that's not saying that you weren't thinking about it for the first 7 months, but you're really getting serious about the reporting deadlines that you have at the end of the year. Who on your team is responsible for that, right? Who is the one that is thinking about these things? I would say at least every month. Maybe you want to do it every quarter, but certainly that should be a point of focus. All right. I have listed in here the day of learning. I love that this organization did this. This idea is that quarterly, the team would gather internal and external experts to share knowledge updates with the leadership that are specifically relevant to upcoming projects. So usually about 3 months in advance, the leadership would say, we are getting ready to dive into one part of our strategic plan, and we don't expect to make any serious decisions for 6 months, 9 months, maybe a year at the latest. And so we would like to bring in all the experts we can for a day of learning. We're going to devote I've seen them devote 2 hours at the minimum, usually a whole day, to bring in a lot of people and to say, talk with us about this. We need to know more about this decision that we're going to get ourselves into. And if you don't plan for it, what will happen is that you get 6 months in and you're close to having to make some of those first decisions about the bigger decision that's coming, and you'll find that you're not prepared. I really love that this organization chose to actively pursue pieces of knowledge early on in the process. I shared one quote earlier. This is probably one of my favorite quotes that I heard 15 years ago. Send your people out and bring outsiders in. If you want to grow an institution, if you want to build a reputation on the outside, show people the great work that you're doing. Send them out. Sure, you'll lose someone every once in a while that'll find green pastures somewhere else, but you will more so gather great information about what other people are doing that can be brought into your context, and also make sure that you're bringing outsiders in so that they can see the great things that you're doing, but also question you about things, nudge you in uncomfortable ways so that you can improve what you're doing. You don't have to take their advice on everything, but you are always listening. Finally, I'll say something that's not on here, that's not written directly on here, but it was built into this plan, is this idea of the monthly review. The senior leadership had an internal ombudsman. Think of this as your institutional review office that your corporation might have. This person, and this was a smaller organization, this person would spend about 20 to 25% of their time doing monthly deep dives into small pieces of the work that had the potential to leverage bigger impacts. As they were thinking about a strategy that they were developing over the next six months to a year, they were thinking, what did we learn from a previous project that we can provide a quick 2-page report on, and make sure that we're learning from our past rather than just trying to run on that treadmill doing the same thing over and over and over. So as we've talked about writing those plans, thinking through the particulars of what's included there, every organization is different, but I wanted to bring up some of the questions that I often get asked about strategic plans, and about not necessarily the design of the plans themselves, but how do we think about the process of strategic planning? So one of the big questions is, who's in the room, right? Who gets to be in the room for how the decisions are made? Now, once again, it is organization dependent, but I would offer up this. I would ask the question, do I have an effective board? Do I trust my board to be involved in the decision making, or at least to respond to some of the ideas that my top level and second level employees are bringing to the table? Wanting to make sure that you're bringing constituents, anyone who's a stakeholder, bring them in early and often, especially if you figure that they might have a negative reaction to your process somewhere along the way. Also take the plan on the road, right? So if you have maybe a buyers in different places, go and talk to them, right? Get outside of your own building, outside of your own organization, and go talk to people who will be directly involved with whether or not your plan will actually be a success. The worst thing that can happen is that you spend 6 to 9 months developing a strategic plan and then immediately hit resistance once you find out that you have no buy-in from your stakeholders. All right, another large question that I often get asked about is, how often do I revise my plan? Is my strategic plan the Constitution that it takes a 3/4 majority to amend it, and it's only been done 27 times over the course of 300 years? Or is it a living document, right, where we'll change something in a week, right, if we have to, just because it wasn't fitting right? Obviously, it's somewhere in between. Every group is different, but a good rule of thumb is to revisit your plan on a yearly basis. Are there things that need to be changed? Now, if there's some catastrophe, you might want to do an autopsy and discover, was it something in the planning or something in the execution that was done? But that's part of the cycle that we have here. Implement, review, revise, renew, repeat, right? Implementation is so important. It could be that that even though you did a great job writing the strategic plan, it wasn't properly implemented. And so as you're reviewing that, you were reviewing with the intent of going back and trying it again. I go to the Dale Carnegie rule here. This is from his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. As he's talking you through in his book, all of the different things that he's encouraging you to do, he says you need to have a monthly personal review. Every month, you need to go back and ask yourselves, am I putting this into practice? I would offer this to you. If someone in your organization is not thinking about your strategic plan, I would say at least once a month, at the most once every quarter, then it's probably not getting implemented. You're probably relying on the old ways of doing things rather than rather than being serious about the change that you were wanting to put into place. I wanted to put in one last piece here. Everything that we've talked about so far has been on a grand scale, 3 to 5 year plans, work plans that last for at least a year. There are some who would say that strategic plans are good for organizational leaders, but if you're a manager, if you have direct reports under you, you might want to think through that what they call managing fast. The acronym stands for looking at goals that occur frequently, right? So the frequent, achievable. I'm going to miss it. My last S&T here. I had it written in my notes that I can't see. Frequent, achievable. I'll look at these last two in just a second, but making sure that you're giving constant feedback to your direct reports. So they're not asking for a month whether or not they did something correctly, right? That they have the ability to come back to you to fail quickly and to quickly get back on the right track. So with that, we'll summarize and say that SMART goals are a framework to use within your strategic planning for your organization. Your goals are what have the ability to move your organization forward. But if you're doing it right, it's going to be difficult, right? It is difficult to write good goals. It takes time, and you have to give yourself the time to do it correctly. Writing SMART goals will allow for honest conversations. Honest conversations can be uncomfortable. But those are the best conversations because it frees you to get away from the old way of doing things and to find a better way. Your organization can be effective if they are working towards that, and it takes everyone together to reach that growth level, to reach flourishing for all of the people that are there. And I think that they'll be happy that you did it. So with that, I'll close it off. Happy to answer questions, or talk about specifics, and really appreciate you being a part of this webinar today.
Thank you, Michael. That was really, really useful and incredible. I was taking notes as you were talking for my own personal edification. So thank you so much for that. Thank you to everyone also for joining us today. And if there's something specific you'd like to ask of Michael, we have a few minutes left. So go ahead and feel free to put that in the chat, and we'll give him a minute to monitor that. As
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, so I'll start going through here, and after I'll give you first go, Andrea. But I had it in my notes. It's the S and the T in FAST are specific and transparent. The transparent part being that you want to make sure that everyone feels like they're being treated fairly, and so they would suggest sharing it with the team, sharing everyone's goals with the team. So I'll stop there.
No, that's great. And that actually really bleeds over into what I teach for our program, which is organizational communications. And one of our primary cornerstones really is transparency for that. So I'm really seeing all these connections in what you're talking about for strategic plans, and in how we talk about strategic planning of communication for our organizations. It's really cool. So I wanted to take a minute to talk very, very quickly about our next webinar. So if this was something that was useful for you and you would like to continue with our series, we're going to skip the month of June, but we will have one in the middle of July. And that one will be hosted by Dr. Nathan Meller and by Linda Zelnick. And they are two of our coaching faculty. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Sorry. I am sorry. Oh, there it is. Sorry, people. There it is. So it's demystifying workplace coaching. So if you've ever had a question about what is executive and workplace coaching, this would be a really great place for you to come and just get some of that background information, and let Nathan and Linda sort of pour into you on why coaching is so incredible. And we also, we offer a certification on coaching. And so we would really enjoy talking to you about that. And that will be on July the 19th. So I wanted to let you know that. I'm so sorry I didn't have that pulled up for you, but The other thing that I wanted to say is that if you have questions that come up later, because I'm always one of those people that I think of a question like 5 minutes after the recording is over, 5 minutes after people leave, you can email us, and our email address, well, there's Michael's. And we also have one for the entire faculty, which is maol@harding.edu. So if you want to send it to that, we would love to help. Julie Hickson Wallace has a question there. Oh, yes, I will definitely add her to our list. Thank you. And is there anything else that we can do for you? If not, we're going to go ahead and close early, because one of the rules of being an organizational leader is ending your meetings on time, if not early. So I will go ahead and leave the chat open for just a few more minutes, but feel free to exit at your pleasure. And we hope to see you in July. Thank you.